personally feel the strongest portion of the game was the first arc post current time skip. Spoiler warning for those that haven't played the game yet, because I will be spoiling things, and if you don't care and you still want to watch, hey, thank you. The war between Clive, Rosfield, and Hugo Kupka, Ifrit versus Titan in the Namekian Republic, and how they're, in reality, the strongest dynamic foil in the game in my personal opinion. Both show beautiful depth of character across the whole arc, even outside of their face-to-face encounters, like how Clive isn't simply a bomb blinded by rage and brooding, and how I also feel it's incredibly stupid to call Kupka a quote-unquote simp, as people say, which a lot of people had said. Honestly, if you say that, I really don't think you were paying attention at all to the game or his relationship with Benedicta, or that first arc with Benedicta, but more on both of those later because both are extremely relevant to this video. Subscribe if you like Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy in general. But let's get on with what I consider the best arc of Final Fantasy 16. We get to really see how Clive has changed after 5 years. He does want revenge on Titan, not for killing Cid because he didn't do that, but for the ambush and slaughter of the hideaway that very night 5 years ago that traumatized so many people. Even outside of revenge, he has a duty to kill Titan, but he's not as furiously blinded as he was in search of the icon that killed Joshua. Not only is he empowered by his duty to do right by Cid, becoming the new Cid, he takes his role as a leader very seriously, establishing much faith in Cid's closest allies like Gav, Karen, Tarja, and Otto, of course. Most impressively so by properly assessing the situation and not trying to jump at every single instant to challenge Hugo, but understanding with the help of a new character from the time skip, Vivian, that he's no dumb brute. He's the intelligent economic and war advisor of the Namekian Republic, and it took 5 full years for Clive to believe it time to move on the mother crystals, which by association would mean it's time to challenge Hugo Kupka. Titan himself as well played it smart by not simply starting a witch hunt for Cid, who he didn't know had actually died, but playing the long game, trying to force the people Clive helps to refuse to desire it, to make them believe that if they are helped, they will be punished. All of this while preventing an essential apocalypse from his nation wanting to make him fight Bahamut to take down Sambrek's conquest early. Both Clive and Hugo have such an intense hatred and rage when it comes to accomplishing their end goal, but are able to set it aside to play the cards safely and intelligently, which I think is a wonderful addition for depth of character by defying a norm that would make them both a broody or brawlic character that's also dumb or really dense. It's so much better writing, making them more than those things, to put all of that aside for the ultimate victory. Throughout this section of the game, it really feels like new territory seated in the unknown, as Clive is the leader attempting to fulfill many ambitions both intentionally and from ones that come his way, like the return of lingering Rosarians struggling to keep Dalmatians from the doorstep, yet roaming the land to bring security, even bringing back old faces from the very beginning of the game. And the biggest mystery for him outside of the threat of Hugo Kupka, he has witnessed Joshua being alive and desires to know more to find out the truth. And with the expansion, we get introduced to one of my favorites, Byron, Clive's lively uncle, who has no difficulty putting away the humor for seriousness, and the wonderful swap in positions between Jill and Clive, not only having their relationship deepen, but Jill facing her paths with her own feelings and the ones who enslaved her, with a great display of her icon Shiva, even if interrupted by Ultima's lackeys. I think the most impressive part is how much content is given in this arc, even outside of the 2 huge climactic moments being both fights between Clive and Hugo Kupka. To me, it never really felt like the pacing was suffering because the story segments, although simple, had a depth that made it meaningful, especially for the characters really driving the narrative very hard, because strong characters will always be able to elevate the storytelling and really drive home the plot and stakes even with simple premises, because of the strength of the writing can make it feel full of flavor. So that's what really let this act of the game surprise me. And various plot lines, Joshua and Yote's relationship growing on their quest, the directions showing off Hugo's wisdom, patience, and cunning, the reintroduction of the very much hated Annabella, and the chess game she's playing on many fronts. Dion's struggle in remaining loyal to this Sambrek, with his father's change in attitude becoming more and more cruel and unusual, desiring to want to take things into his own hands for the better and stop this war, meeting Cid's daughter Mid, then all these intense, heartwarming, funny, and infuriating moments that wonderfully interweave with each other, surrounding 2 of the biggest climaxes in the game in absolutely this arc, both confrontations between Clive and Kupka. Each and every aspect of the confrontations show them off so well, as we find that Kupka knows Clive's real identity. He takes to causing even more chaos in Rosaria, all to lure Clive out of hiding finally so he won't have to look for him himself. He's not playing it like he did 5 years ago. Oh no spies, no sneak attack, and no immediate priming into Titan. This is personal to really get the job done. Justice once and for all for Benedicta's sake. Like I said at the beginning, I think it's so dumb to call Kupka a simp or whatever dumb thing people say for wanting to avenge Benedicta. He simply loved her and he was receiving love in return. He never knew that she didn't actually love him because 1, Barnabas was a secret, and 2, he had no idea about her past with Sid at all, and either way, they were not a thing anymore. And 3, she never once gave him reason to distrust her. So was she lying? Yes, but he didn't know anything about that and she never revealed anything about that, and she died before any of that could even be revealed. He never even met Barnabas either. You can't call him a simp or whatever for what's in his eyes the mutual love of his life having been killed and wanting to take revenge for it. Now don't get me wrong, he was still a crooked guy, of course, just like Benedicta was, given to Benedicta's literal characterization as an unstable trickster, and none of that was ever revealed to Hugo at all. Also, feel free to comment how you feel about Benedicta too, and subscribe on your way down there. Sorry about this rant, I had to get that out of the way, my apologies, but this is all relevant to how much of a proper foil to Clive he actually is and the strength of Kupka's character, and why he really just gets talked so down on for what seems like no reason, for something that's completely objectively incorrect. So back on track, Clive fully intended on springing the trap that Kupka was setting for him with the help of Gav and Jill and Rosaria. They needed to be quiet but effective, and it worked, but Kupka was still one step ahead. And honestly, some didn't like the fact of Jill not fighting back as much against Kupka after he captured her, but this doesn't downplay her level of strength. This is just to show 3 things. 1, Kupka's battle sense of holding Jill in vital spots at Magic mission, or threats to her life like her hands being behind her back, then her throat, which makes it much more dangerous for her to try anything because all he'll have to do is react to instantly kill her. 2, taking Jill to cause Clive to falter, and 3, give himself a mental high ground by not even losing his cool, but wanting to take his revenge step by step with a public execution even. So I don't see this as a damsel in distress moment. I just see this as, regardless of man or woman, they are in war with each other, and Kupka simply outplayed both of them, and Jill was the cost in that moment. He did have backup plans even if it goes wrong for him, which it does thanks to Clive and Torgo's incredible sync and Torgo's transformation. After Gav being the GOAT and freeing Clive, he was still able to combat Clive face to face, and when they meet in the Rosarian throne room, man, I knew instantly it would be one of my favorite moments. Despite all the credit I give Kupka, Clive is right back on the strong foot with his presence and standing his ground with every great rebuttal in the book. They have a witty dialogue about Clive's journey here and what his true motive is as Kupka destroys the throne of his home, making Clive just yell out asking what his goal is. And when Kupka reveals it's revenge for Benedicta, even though Sid is dead, he'll just have to put it on Clive, who's taken his name. Clive not only refuses to answer for any crimes but his own, saying if there was anybody he wanted to save Benedicta in the first place, it was Sid, but he straight out tells Kupka that it was him that killed Benedicta all along. Did he need to say that? Absolutely not. Should he have? Probably not, but it was so raw. So yes, sir, I am so down. This makes the air in the room change completely. Kupka going from anger to peace, then to hilarity was chilling, as he is now much happier that he can exact his revenge on the real culprit, something he felt he was robbed of 5 years ago. The drums, man. Before he even begins saying that, just one drum beat, and then it continues, increasing each moment. As it continues to rise, he shows off his power and enters his semi-prime form that we get to see for the very first time. Clive doesn't even immediately retaliate with getting at the ready with his. He just airs out him on his errand thinking, how many lives has Kupka taken? How many dreams has he crushed? Yet he's not the only one who's had his life fall apart around him, so he'll receive no pity or mercy from him because Clive ain't a typical MC. In many cases, an MC in a JRPG will find some sort of reason to be empathetic, try their best to not take a life if they don't want to. At the very end, they'll have to realize that some people have to want to be saved to be saved. Clive doesn't have any of that. He is honoring the victims first, straight up. He is going to go for the throat. And this shows just how similar him and Kupka are right now, and with aspects of what they used to be like. Clive would have done anything to save Jill, just like Kupka would Benedicta. Clive was on a blind war path to find the killer of Joshua, even though on the inside, deep down, he knew it futile and hypocritical, having taken the lives of many innocents and guilty just to buy time for something he knew was on his hands. Similar to Kupka being on a war path, trying to bring innocence of Rosaria into the equation and ruining the lives of many outside of it to bring down Clive's reputation and ruin people's faith in him, all for revenge, even though him and Benedicta both did terrible things, and really, she only got what was coming to her. They're both so smart, yet so filled with rage that they know exactly the nature of the other for this 5-year chess match to result into this. They even made them both yell "now die" simultaneously, with Kupka on the right and Clive on the left. This was completely intentional for sure. They have to have known and really intended for them to be a clear foil for one another. And it's great to have even the very cinematography able to reflect that, you know? And like I said earlier, it's the first time we get to see the semi-prime form of Titan. We finally get to fight had another dominant of an icon. It's the first since Benedicta, and that felt like so long ago by this point. And it looks so cool. He doesn't even need a blade because the crystals from his form clash with them already. Clive is fighting with the sword and he's just using his body. And this fight, bro, for a game that isn't very difficult, this was probably the hardest in the game, even though I still don't consider it that hard, but it was a very noticeable difference even for the stuff afterwards. But what a worthwhile payoff, not just in difficulty, but in flair. Even seeing the first actual limb cut off in this game, I think. There's been death, but we haven't really seen any limbs getting cut off like on some Star Wars type beat. Now, I made a video in my Choose Your Hand series where I pitted Final Fantasy 16's Icon versus Xenoblade Chronicles 2's Artifice. Check that out if you haven't, and I always have to mention when I'm talking about this game is how well they display the level of power that the summons and by association, these dominants of the Icon have, which is even further shown in their final fight, Ifrit versus Titan, then versus Titan Lost. On the way to the Mother Crystal and eventually the Titan Lost fight, there's many highlights like Byron opening up to Clive, more of Joshua and Yote, and most importantly, another being that ties in Clive and Hugo together, Barnabas's manipulation with his followers. Hugo, now being sent into despair after being forcefully removed from his fight against Clive, just has his love for Benedicta used against him, being lied to that she used the Mother Crystal to gain power while keeping sentience. So all of that sets up, even though Clive is moving on and up and Kupka downwards, it's actually true that Clive is just also descending more into the hands of Barnabas and Ultima. They really are one and the same, getting played again and again and again. Even when they feel like they're rising, they're falling. Sometimes when it feels like they're falling, they might actually be being led to a rise. It's kind of sad to see Kupka get used once again because he never really did know he was being played by any of them, even to the point of seeing embarrassing hallucinations of Clive and Benedicta, causing him to lash out once and for all. And it's also sad for Clive too. And we know as we get on to the end game just how used Clive was this entire time. And again, like I said, Kupka wasn't even close to dumb. He just had his pain used against him. And I'd be lying, and you'd be lying if he didn't act like Clive didn't fall victim to the exact same thing many times, as that's a big part of his character arc, something he had to constantly fight back against. And it was true that the Mother Crystal would bestow great power upon Kupka, and it did, to an extreme level that created such an amazing transformation into Titan Lost. They for real gave us an Ashura's Wrath and Sonic type boss fight right after a normal fight against Titan, which was already really good. It was incredible, and seeing a great balance of combat and reaction commands for an Icon fight, not to mention seeing the different scales of size between Ifrit and Titan, and then Titan Lost, and then Titan again falling through Titan Lost's body. It was so wild. I mean, we've seen Titan up close to Shiva before, way at the beginning of the game, but this was all out. And in the end, that was the end of Hugo Kupka. After he primes, there's no more dialogue from him, and then a beautiful scene of Ifrit destroying Drake's Fang. It's over. This hands down was my favorite arc of the game, and I do consider it also the best arc. The runner-up being probably the first initial part of the game with Benedicta and Cid. And there's other parts of the games that I also think hit pretty high highs that are just as high or even higher, but overall, this arc got the rest beat. And it's a shame because I do feel like the pacing starts to fall off after this enough to feel decently inconsistent, and that's sad, but it was still good. It was still a good game in the end. But yeah, I feel like I've yapped enough about this. I could keep going on, but I'll just be tangenting all day more and more. Subscribe if you haven't. Put hashtag Prime on your comment if you stayed this long. And for the question of the video, how do you feel about Clive and Hugo's dynamic and their characters? Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.